Welcome to the Two Gurus Talk Compliance podcast with me, Kristy Grant-Hart. I'm here with the one and only Tom Fox. This week, we're covering a whole heap of AI-related content. That includes people getting AI psychosis, TikTok laying off its content moderators in favor of AI reviewers, and employees training AI agents to take their compliance training for them. We also have Florida woman who claims cocaine came through the car window and accumulated accidentally in her purse. But first, Tom, how's your week been, and what do you think has been the most interesting development?
I'm going to have to go way inside baseball because Yordan Alvarez, the Astros' preeminent slugger, played his first game in 100 games last night, coming back from a broken hand. In the baseball world, that's a big deal.
I'm certain it is. I couldn't even come up with Savannah Bananas, Tom. I'm glad that you're excited about that. But you're also, your first story, Tom, I have not heard this. So tell us what is going on, because you kind of frightened me. I'm not going to lie.
In California?
That was the Civil Rights Department, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So, yes, California has amended their basically CCPA to require that employees are protected and applicants are protected from potentially discriminatory employment decisions made by what the state calls automated decision systems, or what you and I would call AI. And these new regulations take effect in 6 weeks. And what this means is that if you use AI, and we've got to talk about workforce, because workforce is in a massive lawsuit now where it's alleged they simply used AI to make the first cut or pass on applicants. And if you do that without a human oversight, that's going to be illegal under California law. And as, if not the largest employer in the United States, certainly the population of California is, New York, Texas, California, whatever number it ranks in, it's a lot of employees, and it applies to private sector employees. Employees will be responsible for their third-party vendors' ADS technology. So that means if you use a workplace or a workforce or any other system that automatically has some sort of AI kicking things out, you're going to have human oversight over that. So there has to be a person acting on behalf of the employer overseeing whatever the AI is doing. And so now you've got to have a compliance program in place. You have to audit that. You have to review your contracts around this, and it's going to be a really big change. And I just stumbled on this, Kristy, and I think this is going to be huge inside the United States.
I will raise my hand and sheepishly tell you that I have not been following this. I wasn't even aware of it. I suddenly opened it and went, oh my God, 6 weeks till all this potential trauma is happening in terms of litigation risk and the ability to, for instance, you need to retain those records under this law for, is it 4 years? Who's doing that? Who is doing that? And in terms of things like oversight of automatic decision-making, if you're using a recruitment agency, this is a third party that's making decisions for you, potentially with AI. This is a really big deal, and I feel like I've heard nothing. So why is that, Tom? Is there just so much noise that we don't hear about it? Or is this totally under the radar until we've got the plaintiff's bar jumping in? What do you think?
I think it's been going on for some time, Kristy, and we've reached a critical mass where a lot of people who are applying, you hear these horror stories. The first lawsuit was filed. It was a black engineer who had 100 straight rejections. And he said, I have a master's degree.
Yeah.
And I have subject matter expertise. There is absolutely zero reason I got 100 rejections in a row. And something strange is going on. But I think that, so there's that. We have a critical mass of people who've experienced this, and we saw this coming out of the pandemic, people with 60, 70, 80 rejections, and they were subject matter expertise and or qualified for the job. But these agencies are not putting any human oversight on the AIs, and it's basically just taking a resume and, going through and ticking it through the AI and, not top 5% of your lawsuit, out. So out, not 5% of your law school class, you're out. That's meaningless.
Yeah.
As we both know. And I think companies are going to have to reevaluate this, but the onus is going to be on them, not on the third-party vendors. Sure, the vendors are going to have to also comply with the law, but companies are going to be responsible for it. So I think it's going to be a huge change. And I'm not sure we've talked enough about the human in the loop on this podcast, but that's going to be a critical part of not just compliance with this law, Kristy, but with the role of compliance going forward. You can't automate everything because AI can't do everything.
That could be our theme today. AI can't do everything, because a lot of our articles touch on that. By the way, Spark Compliance is hiring. Hi, everybody. And so I today, as a human, worked through the first, we put it up yesterday afternoon. We've had already 32 applicants in a very short amount of time. But it was interesting to go through and look at them. And some of them that I think an AI would look at and be like, no, that doesn't match exactly what this says. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Huh. So as a person who is going to be this hiring manager, again, I've typically just hired for my network, but looking at actual applications coming through the Diligent website, I think that the human element does see things that AI wouldn't. And that is going to make my team stronger. And that's what I think about it.
And that the brilliance of your last statement is exactly the way compliance needs to think of AI. The adaptation of AI for human use is going to make the difference. It's going to speed things up, but it's also going to give you more information to make that decision with your oversight.
So there's a different direction that I wanted to go with the next one, Tom. It is a New York Times piece that I thought was so interesting. So Google could get broken up this week. Here's what it would mean. So that sounds pretty okay. That's interesting. No, it's more interesting than that. Now, there's always a danger when recording a podcast that the answer to the question, what happens to Google, has already been answered by the time you're listening to this. However, the article actually is worth reading regardless for its take on antitrust enforcement and the way enforcement actions can shape industries, including right now AI. So last year, a federal district court held that Google broke antitrust law by using illegal means to maintain a monopoly over online search. And it did this by making gigantic payments to companies like Apple and Samsung, which was alleged and found to ensure that those companies favored Google search within their products. So Google has been waiting a darn long time to find out what the court will do to fix the situation. Possibilities right now include forcing the sale of assets like the Chrome browser or Android, or allowing others to buy their data. So the thing that was so interesting about this story to me, Tom, was the idea that the actions taken by Google and other large technology companies because of the antitrust issues and enforcement changed the way business was done in these industries. So the article was talking about how in the 1950s, antitrust actions against AT&T helped spawn the semiconductor industry when AT&T was limited to telecommunications. And that innovation took off when antitrust actions against Microsoft came in the 90s, and they paved the way for the new modern internet platforms. So the article finishes by saying that no matter what ultimately happens to Google's behavior has changed because of this antitrust action, and that has allowed for multiple AI companies to thrive in a way that the author of the article thinks would never have happened without this antitrust ruling essentially reining in the activities of Google now, like antitrust did with AT&T and Microsoft. So I just felt this was so interesting, Tom. I think it shows the real world value of antitrust enforcement actions on competition. What struck you here?
So I am a huge fan of the 1911 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Standard Oil of New Jersey versus the United States, where the U.S. Supreme Court broke up the monopoly known as Standard Oil. But what came out of Standard Oil was the following: Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Standard Oil of California, SoCal, Amoco, Conoco, Arco, Marathon Oil, all became multi-billion-dollar companies by the breakup of Standard Oil. So when I saw the potential breakup of Google, I thought this would be a fabulous way to do it, which was to use the Standard Oil model. It proved that breaking up a company is not going to make it go away. You're going to create a bunch of competing companies, and that's going to create more space. So I'm a huge fan of that model. I recognize it's 114 years ago, but I still think it's a valid way to go. And I think they should break Google up and let the chips fall where they may. But you're going to have more wealth created, more work created, more ideas implemented if you break the company up and they all compete against each other, in addition to everything you said, because I think the space will still be available for the solopreneur innovator.
There we go. So maybe next time, Tom, we can talk about what happened because we'll know by then, probably. I can't even believe this next case, Tom. I can't. Please tell us about what you want to talk about next.
Our friends at TikTok, or maybe your friends at TikTok. TikTok has fired its content moderators in the United Kingdom and is going to replace them with AI. And the title of this article is TikTok to lay off hundreds of UK content moderators and AI push. My title would have been, What Could Go Wrong?
That's exactly what I wrote in my notes. I'm like, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And here you'll have, maybe you could certainly have broad parameters. You could have the movie rating system. The current podcast system is explicit or general. And you can have everything in between, or you can have 25 different categories of content moderation. But I think at the end of the day, you have to put a human, because if their stomach turns, if the hair on the back of their neck stands up, if somebody goes, ooh, that's going to be the human reaction. And that's whether perhaps it should or shouldn't meet a content requirement at TikTok. But I just think this is absolutely inane. And I'm sure we'll get a little message from TikTok. No, Tom, you're wrong. You're going to have oversight and blah, blah, blah. But all these people got laid off. And I think it's a huge mistake for TikTok to make.
I just, when you look at all the things that happen in social media, when you looked at, I think Facebook Live showed an execution once accidentally, there really are very bad things that happen on the internet. So having AI trying to understand the nuance of human experience of, I don't know, the gross, the horrible, the awful, trying to make sure it somehow understands everything that goes wrong. Look, the only upside I could think of was if AI is doing this job, you could argue that in the kind of free speech, woke, are things being moderated out because they're conservative or because they're not conservative. I suppose that's something helpful that they can just point to and say AI did this, but I think this is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. So we will see how this goes. But I'm not a TikTok person anyway. I'm really not going to be now. So there we go.
There we go. Neither am I.
Yeah. All right. Now, turning to something, it's not equally awful, but it's not great. Tom, I am certain that you have never cheated on your compliance training. It's not a thing you did.
Not a thing I did.
Okay. It turns out that some people are in fact trying to do. Can you even believe it? Matt Kelly of Radical Compliance certainly can. He reports on using AI to cheat on compliance training in his fantastic Radical Compliance blog. So one of the large compliance training companies put Chat GPT 5.0 into agent mode, then had it take a rival company's training course. So clever Chat GPT AI had no problem answering the questions correctly and clicking on the next button to get through the training. So here we go. People can now use AI to take compliance training if they really put their mind to it. Probably. The company didn't go checking to see if every compliance training can be hacked with an AI agent. Regardless, this is a pretty unnerving experiment. Matt notes that people have been cheating on compliance training for a long time, ever since there was an executive with an administrative assistant to take the training for them. Finding a way out of compliance training has certainly been a popular sport. Also, Matt notes that if your compliance training is so bad that people figure out how to use an AI agent to get around it, please call me. We create astonishingly good e-learning and gamified training content. Advertisement over. Matt's closing thoughts, though, are particularly poignant. So he started to talk about maybe it isn't the end of the world if an AI agent takes your basic conflicts of interest training, but think more broadly. What if a company is under a monitorship for money laundering violations and the regulator found that people weren't taking the training courses? or if AI agents take safety critical training instead of people doing it. Look, Tom, I watched the video and it's a pretty nightmarish scenario for compliance officers. But then again, I can't imagine millions of people are so keen to avoid their 20 minutes compliance training that they spend 20 minutes working hard enough to get the AI system to take it for them. Is this a real problem, or is this an anomaly that only some people are ever even going to try to undertake?
I'm going to have a little test of your biblical knowledge
Oh,
here.
dear. Okay.
So, Cain kills Abel.
Uh-huh.
Murder is created. We now move to the world's second oldest profession. The world's third oldest profession is cheating on exams. This has been going on since the ancient Greeks. What's the big deal? They cheated on the exam. CF, PWC, CDF, KPMG. I just think this is nothing.
Okay.
It's no big deal. People have cheated on exams. You've cited examples. Matt cited examples. I watched that video. I tried to do it. It took me longer to figure out how to do it than to take the video.
Yeah.
Training. I just think this is no big deal at all. If you're a compliance training company, which I know you are, you probably need to be prepared to address this because it's now been raised. But it's also the point Matt buried near the end was maybe it's time to reevaluate our training. Because if our training is so simplistic that an AI can take it and get 100% right 100% of the time, maybe there's a different way. Maybe 5 minutes over 4 weeks is enough. Maybe even micro training, maybe even engaged messaging. Maybe Ronnie Feldman with some of his comedic turns is a way to go. There's 100 ways to go. You're only limited by your imagination. But people have been cheating on tests forever. And yeah, AI helps you cheat. Okay. What's the big deal?
Tom is not worried. We got this. I hear, though, that AI is coming for culture, at least according to the New Yorker. What do you want to talk about with this?
Yeah, this is just, I think all of our listeners know I've taken a deep dive into AI. So I try to read some of the cultural commentary and commentary at. The New Yorker is just that. I love that magazine. I live in the Hill Country. I still subscribe to the New Yorker. But there was a great article about AI and culture, and the author or the writer focused on AI taking the place of some traditional forms of media, which I was incredibly pleased that podcasts had been elevated to one of those forms. But he talked about film, he talked about television, he talked about radio, and or music, I should say, and how AI was influencing those media and how the creators, some were using AI exclusively, some were human and AI, and they were playing with what might be the best mix. So that was really interesting. But it said one thing that really struck me. It said AI can't get culture. It can describe a Texan, it can describe a Southerner, but that's not our culture. And you have to experience that culture to understand what all of those terms mean, just like a Southern California girl. What does that mean? But in the corporate world, that's what we talk about is our culture. And yes, you could say, can program an AI say we're only doing business ethically and in compliance. But the compliance comes from making people aware to pick up the phone and call compliance. It comes from making people aware, oh, I shouldn't do that's a potential conflict of interest. Or maybe we need to do more due diligence because a red flag has appeared. And what I took out of it was AI can give you some basics, but once again, if you don't have human oversight or the human in the loop is what the AI people tell us, you're not going to have the best of both worlds. And just as the California law about automatic decision systems says, you got to have a human oversight. But you have to have human oversight in AI and in culture and in the creative process.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know about that. I think one of the other points that the article started to talk about was how the algorithms are so good at feeding us information, and frankly, that they continually maybe are creating an experience of culture that people are having and starting to see that as reality. We have an article later about AI psychosis, which is amazing, and people getting psychosis from it. But I wonder how much people are bringing all of that to work with them, and whether or not that culture is being so influenced by AI that perhaps they're seeing things through those lenses. I don't know. I think this is really early days to see how AI is actually interpreting and redistributing ideas of culture that then make people believe things that maybe they haven't experienced are real. So we'll see. But I love this piece. I think it's beautifully written and definitely worth a read. So thank you for bringing it up. Do you want to talk about AI making people dumb and sad?
Unfortunately, it has become a thing. And we have an article from the BBC that the Microsoft's head of artificial intelligence, Mustafa Suleyman, says that people are increasingly reports of people suffering what he calls AI psychosis. And the fear is that AI is like Skynet, has become self-aware, or there's seemingly AI consciousness. And he makes clear there's zero evidence of AI consciousness today. I would have said never, but we probably learned never to say never. But Claude or Grok or any of those imaginary AI tools, you're right. The algorithms are very good, and you can have some very good conversations. And I've had some of those very good conversations, but it's not sentient. It's not going to advise me on matters of the heart, nor should it. My heart or others. I just shake my head and laugh when I read articles like this. But if we take kind of the end of the last article that you talked about, I think a lot of people are going down that rabbit hole just like they went down rabbit holes pre-AI into Reddit groups or dark web groups or other groups, and they found an echo chamber where people either talked and thought like them, or they were persuaded by thought to do nefarious acts. And I think AI can lend itself to that or lead to that, because once you get that algorithm thinking one way, if you don't have human oversight on the content moderation, it may go all the way down that.
So I'm going to talk about this in connection with the article that AI made me dumb and sad, which was actually in Corporate Compliance Insights. So I want to talk about these two together.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Okay.
So AI, basically, this is written by the CCI's director, Jennifer L. Gaskin. And what she talks about is her love-hate relationship with AI as she's trying to use it to help her with her day-to-day writing tasks for Corporate Compliance Insights. So the author cites numerous studies about how AI works in the real world, in the human experience, as opposed to how people hype its myriad miraculous possibilities. I love this, Tom. One annual survey found that positive sentiment for AI tools goes down when use goes up. So when the miracle doesn't show up. And people don't like what it's doing. So 43% say AI is more likely to harm than benefit them, and only 23% expect it to have a positive impact on their life. In fact, 16% of respondents in one survey admitted to pretending to use AI to make their boss happy, which I could totally see that, by the way. Some bosses are kind of nuts about this. So after much frustration, the author decided to stop asking AI to help her write great headlines. That was what she was trying to have it help her to do, because, as she said, it made it feel dumb and sad, and she would prefer to not feel dumb and sad. So we've got dumb, we've got sad, we've got psychosis. We have people in the BBC article that you cited to using Chat GPT to convince them that they had a fantastic employment case, to the point where they canceled their lawyer meetings because they were certain it was going to work, because Chat GPT was so enthusiastic about their chances. And another person who believed that AI absolutely 1,000,000% fell in love with her and only her, and that they were a real couple. Okay, so I think this is so interesting. It was at a conference that I led a session where someone said that they believed that AI would eventually have a group like PETA, right? The People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals Are Sentient, versus PTI or something like that, where it's People for the Ethical Treatment of AI. And love that the Microsoft person is waving a flag and saying, no, these are still machines. But when we have this broad experience of, is it really helping? When is it not helping? When is it? It should not be your emotional crutch. And we see people, there's a couple of stories recently where people end up killing themselves. We have to be aware from our corporate environments that there will be people experiencing some of this. And the push to use AI all the time, coupled with the loneliness that is endemic in the world right now, is a problem. And we need to be conscious of that and doing things like talking about employee help programs, those EAP programs, trying to make sure people are using them, because it's one thing to feel dumb and sad. It's a whole other thing to get psychosis. So definitely things that we need to worry about.
I agree.
All righty, let me move on to my good friend and mentor, the godfather of compliance, Joe Murphy, in his wonderful Ideas and Answers newsletter, where he prompts Chat GPT with this question: what is the role incentives play in a compliance and ethics program? Now, let's be clear. Incentives are Joe's bugbear. Anyone who's ever heard him speak knows that's his thing. He loves to talk about them and loathes how often they are ignored by compliance professionals, or more importantly, the companies that employ those professionals. So ChatGPT came to Joe's rescue, and Joe published ChatGPT's response about the importance of incentives in compliance programs. It noted the necessity for rewarding ethical behavior instead of simply punishing misbehavior. It also noted regulatory expectations around incentives, as well as the DOJ guidance and federal sentencing guidelines statements in support of incentives. It basically all but quoted Joe's books on how to do incentives well. And I think Joe was pleased with how well ChatGPT understood the importance of incentives in compliance programs. And now if we can just get companies to do the same. So Tom, even ChatGPT knows that incentives are important in compliance programs, but I swear, in my consulting world, they are such a non-starter with nearly every company, even really advanced ones. Companies don't seem interested. So what do you tell a compliance officer trying to get their foot in the door of incentives to say to management or board? Because even ChatGPT can't make this case well enough.
So 20 years ago, when a compliance officer would ask me, oh my gosh, how do we put incentives, compliance incentives, to a pay structure? I would say, take 10% of your discretionary bonus and make that applicable to compliance. I was like, oh my God, how do we do that? How do we measure compliance? It's so squishy. My head's going to blow up. And I said, a lot of your bonus is squishy. Yeah. HR does this day in and day out. Go talk to HR. But you could start with, 1, did they complete all of their training? 2, have they violated any internal policies and procedures? And 3, have they been helpful to you in compliance? And they said, that? We can use that as a measurement? I'm like, you can use anything you want as a measurement. And I'm still having those conversations in 2025.
So am I. Yes.
Now, let me give you the flip side of that. At Halliburton, when I was in the GC's office, the legal department, we had a country manager. Yeah, he was a country manager at the time. And he said the following. Our code was called a Code of Business Ethics. He said, if I violate the Code of Business Ethics, I may or may not get caught. If I violate the Code of Business Ethics and get caught, I may or may not be disciplined. If I miss my numbers for 2 months, 2 quarters, I'll be fired.
Yep.
And guess what? He never missed his numbers. Yeah. He's now the head of the Far East Division, or APAC. And what does that say about the culture at that company? It says the most important thing was making your numbers. And that's where you can have an appropriate incentive level. Because if someone doesn't make their numbers, they don't get fired. And everybody will see that. What was the reason? If there's a legitimate business reason, that can be taken into account. If they turned down a major contract because it was in China with third parties they couldn't do complete due diligence on, they walked away from it for a business and ethics reasons. That word gets out. But that's the kind of incentive that I think, hopefully, we have evolved past simply everybody's discretionary bonus. at the end of the year, but you can put real incentives in place if senior management not simply talks the talk, but walks the walk. And if it's miss your numbers for 2 quarters and you're fired, everybody gets that message, and nobody who succeeds misses their numbers.
But Tom, haven't you just incentivized people to use the Chat GPT agent to do their training to make sure it's done on time? I'm just saying.
There is that. If they're not techno idiots like me and can't figure out how to do it.
Okay. What about historians? Are they at risk, Tom?
So I'm a history, have a history degree undergrad. So I consider that part of my at least academic background. I love history. I love historians. I know all the top ones, or at least I've read most of their books. And so I was really intrigued by this article because historians are not going to be replaced by AI. And it was followed by, there's really 2 articles here. It was followed by the article I cited, or we cited in our show notes, and that involved the historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. And I've been reading Doris Kearns before she got married to Dick Goodwin, so I called her Doris Kearns, since the early 70s. She's about 15 years older than me. And so she kind of took up this challenge of answering this question, why AI won't replace historians, and asked AI, or said, I'm feeling disheartened given my lifelong dedication to history. What do you think, AI? AI came back and said, no, it's not going to happen. And the AI listed 4 reasons why AI will not replace history. And it's going to be the same with compliance professionals. Number 1, AI is great at retrieval and synthesis, but not judgment. That's the role of a compliance officer, and that's the role of a historian. 2, archival work and discovery are human intensive. Most of history research, particularly, involves sifting through original messy materials with fragmented source materials, putting them in the right context. Certainly AI can help with the transcription, but not the selection. Interpretation is shaped by your lived experience, and in the corporate world, that means culture. What does the culture say? And then this is my favorite. Collaboration, not replacement, is the future. That's the human in the loop. That's the thing we started with way back when with the California law, that there's can and should be collaboration between the human and AI, but there should not be replacement. I thought it was a great way to think about this, really, even for the compliance professional. Anytime Doris Kearns Goodwin writes something, I'm going to read it. There.
I like it.
Your thoughts?
What I think is there's an interesting through line here. I don't know, Tom, if you've ever tried to use Chat GPT to help you. I've tried to use it to help me with my podcast talk track. So what I have done previously and stopped entirely was I put the articles that I chose into Chat GPT. I use my voice. Here's examples, et cetera, et cetera. Can you give me bullet points so that I'm ready to talk on my podcast, and basically skip the very difficult part of thinking through it, writing through it, trying to make it interesting, all the things. It did, but what it did was it didn't get the important bits. It didn't understand in context what the nuance was that the compliance officer would care about, or how that take is going to be taken into account based on what's going on in Europe or Asia. It doesn't have enough context to do it properly. And when we look at some of these things that we've talked about, like the writing and not being able to come up with really, truly great headlines, or that to me really strongly related to what this article was talking about in terms of historians being people who need the context, the creativity, the ability to draw on cultures of the past or the present in order to have new ideas. So I think creativity cannot entirely be replaced with AI, and that makes me feel good. I like that.
I actually just said what I was going to add on as an addendum. They can't replicate Kristy. They can't replicate all the way from compliance Kristy to diligent Kristy. They can't replicate the smile, the laugh, the eye roll, the now Tom, whatever it is you're doing. And they'll never be able to replicate that.
There will never be another Tom Fox created by Claude. All right. However, let's talk about non-intelligence, or certainly less intelligence. We're going to Florida. We're going to Florida, woman. Is this time? I think we can leave the AI behind and talk about real people. Florida woman Kenesha Posey thought she had the wind in her sails as she rode around as a passenger in a car driving erratically. Police pulled over the vehicle and smelled that distinctive skunky smell of marijuana. The cops asked to go through Miss Posey's purse, and wouldn't you know, the pot was in her bag. Unfortunately for Miss Posey, so was a bunch of cocaine. Now, how did it get in her handbag? According to Miss Posey, she said, quote, "I don't know anything about any cocaine. It's a windy day. It must have blown through the window and into my purse," unquote. Yes, that's a terrible affliction these days, all that cocaine flying around in the air, landing in unsuspecting people's purses and open backpacks. The police weren't exactly blown away by her story. Instead, she was hit with felony possession charges and released on bond, proof that her excuse didn't exactly fly. The moral of this story is that blaming the breeze will only blow your credibility out the window.
And on that note,
thank you for listening to the Two Gurus Talk Compliance podcast. Until next time, I'm Kristy Grant-Hart.
and I'm Tom Fox.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.